The Fastmasters might go down as the craziest idea for any racing series in modern history. What do? You take legends of the past from almost every form of motorsports: NASCAR, IndyCar, sports cars, drag racing, Lord knows what else. Place them in priceless, more than $1 million per car, Jaguar XJ 220s. And where do you take them for this made-for-TV competition? Not Road America, big track, flex the muscles, stretch their legs. No, you go to the tiniest of tiny, Indianapolis Raceway Park. And then you throw those cars with those aging lions onto the roval and expect them to keep the cars in one piece and entertain. Well, they succeeded in the latter. There was entertainment. There was carnage. This crazy idea, crafted by our friend, TV producer extraordinaire, Terry Lingner, and then was won in its very first season and only season by the great three-time Indy 500 winner, Bobby Unser, and also facilitated by Tony Dow and Tom Walkinshaw Racing USA out of Valparaiso, Indiana. Will we ever see it again? Absolutely not. This is too insane. But now, on the 25th anniversary, getting Terry, getting Uncle Bobby, and even Tony Dow, all the way from Australia now, to share thoughts about this bizarre summer collision of huge names, wickedly fast cars on the most ill-fitting track possible, and all of the mayhem and behind-the-scenes silliness imaginable just seemed right. The Fastmaster Series, at 25 years old, a special feature on the Marshall Pruett podcast, presented by Cooper Tires, starting with Terry Lingner, continuing with Bobby Unser, and closing with Tony Dow. Off we go.
Terry Lingner, I have been wanting to sit down and talk about what has now become the 25th anniversary of the, I believe, the first made-for-TV racing series, Fastmasters. For those of us who are old enough to have been delighted and also slightly concerned by the amount of carnage that took place, I can't wait to get into this. But for those who maybe are young enough to have not been fortunate to see this creation, let's start with just the first ruminations of historic race car drivers, legendary race car drivers. What can we do to give them some sort of platform to come back and entertain? Where did this concept start to come from for you?
It really came as a offshoot of, just being involved for such a long time, obviously. But, at the time I was doing a lot more NASCAR. And I was struck by the idea that the Bobby Allisons and the Pettys and the Pearsons of the world could still haul the mail. And the idea that maybe a stock car you could do like seniors golf. Why not have a Saturday race for guys over 45? And, it's literally at ESPN, I was just trying to think of a way to maybe create some more programming, but maybe a 100-mile race, even on race day, which is sacrilegious in NASCAR,
Sure.
only one race. But it just kind of came out of that the people that built the sport on their backs, and then you obviously throw Mario and Parnelli, all these guys, but it never did seem practical that you would ever want to do something like that in an open wheel car. But I was really, honestly, my first thought was, how could I create a 10-race seniors package for NASCAR? And that got it percolating.
So looking through my prize acquisition from this year's Indy Memorabilia Show, Fastmasters press kit, was able to read about a few things I wasn't fully aware of. You happen to be speaking with our mutual friend, the insane Tony Dow, who had an interest in putting together a spec series with the Jaguar XJ 220 supercars, with the IMSA GTP side of the series really starting to fall on hard times by 93 or so, and TWR USA looking to find something else to do. Tony apparently had a concept for wanting to do a spec series to support IMSA. You're there speaking with him, and this sounds like the old, hey, put your peanut butter in my chocolate kind of idea. You have something that might work.
Perfect analogy. It's exactly what happened. We were at Daytona for the Rolex. I can't remember if it was the test. I think it was the test. And Tony had mentioned that. I said, hey, this probably doesn't fit at all, but I have free television for you, because Tom Walkinshaw had made a promise to the Jaguar board that if they let him build these cars, he would get them on TV.
Nice.
And IMSA, whatever the deal, everywhere he went, he was just getting pushback. And I said, classic Lingner, I guess. I'll just say, hey, this. I think we could figure out a braking and downshifting exercise, but it would be compact. Let me buff this out. Let me take it to you. And they kind of like, okay.
Maybe, all right.
But they like the idea of free television, live television. And, one thing led to another, and pretty soon we thought, well, this isn't so crazy. And, gosh, I remember when I invited Parnelli, he was like, you're nuts. This is never going to happen. I have heard this 10 times in my life. But, I give Tony and Tom a lot of credit. They were like, they weren't, poo-pooing it. It's like, okay, well, maybe this can work. So it kind of did.
So we have these brand new supercars, the Paganis, the Lamborghini Aventadors of their day. These, again, at this point, the world didn't have a lot of $500,000 plus supercars you could buy. So here we have this low-production twin-turbo V6 Jaguar. Looks like it's going 1,000,000 miles an hour sitting still. And you're trying to think of venues to host this series, this made-for-TV series. Indianapolis Raceway Park Road Course was a willing or maybe unwitting participant in the theater of drama that came from this by taking these supercars and putting them on a track about the size of your thumb. How did venue and choice of venue get explored and ultimately decided upon?
All television driven.
Oh, really?
At the day on the day, that was it. I mean, the real beauty for Thunder across the board, and why I think it was successful, was that we left all of our cable at the time. It wasn't fiber, obviously, in 2 spots, at Raceway Park and in Ventura. So we could plug and play. We could show up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody gets a single-day pay. We would get in and out. It was a perfect venue for a perfect way for television, actually, with heat races and the last chance race. It just, everything fits so nicely. So even going to the road course wasn't even an option. I'd also say one of the things I think made this easy to sign people, even at the time, like a Parnelli or a Pearson or Bobby Allison making his comeback, was that there was a wall. They're not seeing 185 down the front stretch at Raceway Park. It's like, hey, let's all get together, put a driver's suit on again, let's have some fun. I'll get a lot of people on the air, and it'll all, it should work out. That had a lot to do with it. But mainly, again, TV. That cost them nothing for television.
Wow. I mean, keep doing this in a budget-minded way, I would say, was not only brilliant, but the list of drivers that were ultimately signed to take part in this, I think that, for me, among many things, Terry, I look at and say, this is almost fantasy.
I know,
this is one of those things where you almost have to just pray every day and ask the Lord to get this lineup.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at this initial 5-round series in 1993, and you look at the list of names, and maybe barring one or two, they're in their respective Hall of Fames, whether it's IndyCar, NASCAR, sports cars. Bob Aiken, Gary Bettenhausen, Jerry Grant, Bobby Allison, Fred Lorenzen, Ed McCulloch, Dick Greer, Jim McElreath, Troy Ruttman, Dick Trickle. Go on and on down the line. Harry Gant, Parnelli Jones, Eddie Hill, Paul Newman. Tell me about the process of not only outreach to these heroes and legends, but also the fact that you didn't want to be too linear. We just want open wheel. We just want NASCAR. You've got drag racers.
Yeah, and they did good, didn't they? I mean, I was blown away by McCullough and Eddie Hill. Those guys really could wield a car. I think, again, Kenny Martin is long time friend and coworker, and he and I and Jenny Nickel, obviously the three of us have lived the sport, and through our association with Speed Week, obviously that crossed over everything. And the long and the short of it is we just started doing exactly what you and I are doing now. We're just sitting and thinking, golly, what about this? And then all of a sudden it just really started compounding, and there's just so many, which I get in a way kind of maybe prove my point, is it's a shame because our sport can do it. You can take these guys and put them back in the car. Look at how Mario drives the two-seater.
Oh, good Lord.
Anyway, just some version of that. I probably one of the things that sticks out in my mind, a couple of things. I mentioned the drag racers, but Paul Newman loved it. Signed autographs, which he never does.
Never.
He really had a good time. He was very peed off that he didn't make the final. He thought it kind of proved to me that, hey, he was a damn good race car driver, but he's not in Bobby Unser's league.
Most importantly, while this was a, quote, made-for-TV championship, this wasn't a gimmick.
No.
There was nothing low-powered about this.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that because that was the case. And I give, again, Tony Dow credit for that as well. He tried, he really did work to get the cars equal and balanced. There obviously wasn't a lot of time to really get everybody super comfortable in the car. Yeah, I think Newman, and then I remember Lloyd Ruby putting on his driver's suit, and it was like, man, he had a hitch in his step, boy. He was just like,
wow.
The shoulders came back, and it was like, so it's cool.
So you amassed this amazing list of folks that want to come participate. You set this multi-round championship. We know the venue, and also coming back to the television angle, I think you also created a bit of anticipation with this as well. Hey, you know that you can turn on, every week at this interval, the exact dates we've laid out.
Sure.
I realize we do the same with Racing Series today, but it's spread over 9 months, however long, may or may not fit into your schedule. I think there was also something about this where if you're a Vic Elford fan, you're a Bob Wallach fan, Guy Edwards, you knew where on the calendar you could tune in and find them in this spectacle. Was that also something you enjoyed, knowing that there was a bit of a strong pacing to this where a different cast of heroes could be seen?
Well, it was a, if you think about it, it was serial reality television before its time, really, just in a nutshell. And it's like a lot what the series IndyCar is trying to do, right? Mark Miles always thought, hey, we've got to give back-to-back racing and build momentum. Obviously, we're trying to stay away from football. We know some of that, but that was really, really important. You mentioned Vic. Vic didn't make it ultimately. Some of this got changed around some,
sure.
But like always, some of it trying to get the all the guys to show with their schedules got a little bit tricky, but. Again, an incredible lineup. I remember Simpson, obviously Bill is a dear friend.
Wild Bill.
There is nobody more competitive in business than Bill. And I remember obviously, like all of us, I went to him for the driver suits and helmets, and he was gracious enough to do it. And we, Kenny and I and Jenny, thought we should give him a really cool framed driver's suit and his gloves, and I've never seen him kind of get soft.
Really?
When I gave it to him. It's still, I don't know if he still has the property, but he told me he put it over his mantle in his ranch in Montana, but that was cool.
So you have worked with TWR and Jaguar to get the cars. You have defined and come up with this list of legends here. You've got the track. You've got the dates. We know that this is going to be a great Thursday Night Thunder edition. Tell us about going into the first round. What was the feeling? We're ready, we're prepared, or holy crap, we're still herding cats and whatnot?
Herding cats, always, right? You're going to the last minute, but honestly, I don't mean to throw JR under the bus, but he was going to be our original test driver, and he only made it to turn one at Raceway Park.
Yeah.
And And because, again, I got a lot of laps in this car. That was one of the beauties of being the promoter. Is I was the VIP driver during the afternoon, so I probably had more laps by a lot than all these guys. But JR had crashed the car, and then the light went on. It's like, uh-oh. So we got Scott Pruett to set the cars up, and that ended up being a pretty good decision, having somebody really super active and still in his prime. Scott's still in his prime. But, we made it, but it was that first race. I got to be honest with you, all that was at stake. I'm working with, the Walkinshaw name, and here I am, little Terry Lingner. And that first lap when Dick Trickle took out the victory lane, when it was all said and done, actually Tom came running in the truck, and he says, "You've got to stop this now." And I actually got my old little redone MGB that I was working on that Benny Parsons helped me buy, and I literally went and drove around 465 for a couple of hours. I just had to get my head clear thinking, God, I've just bankrupted my company.
What have I just done?
Yeah. But like anything, if you sleep on it, don't do anything too rash. And plus, if you say you're going to do something, you got to follow through. So it was pretty hairy there after.
So that was the takeaway. This first race, highly anticipated. Tune in and see your heroes. And there was some machinery that was second and third hand.
Yeah.
Not pretty soon into the event.
Yeah.
What was the general reaction afterwards in the paddock? From the folks maybe at TWR USA who would be having to rehab these poor things to get them ready again. I mean, it was an amazing spectacle, Terry, but there was also a pretty big work list to do after.
Yep. No, they just went to work. As again, for anybody that's listening that even remotely knows Tony, he is relentless and a brilliant man. Not always the most fun to be around, but a lot of times the brilliant guys aren't. And but he was same deal. It's like we made this deal. We've made the commitment to the Jaguar board. Most importantly, I wanted to get these guys some money as well. I mean, it was $5,000 to show up. Wasn't that great of money, but their driver's suit they got to keep, and a lot of them actually redonated so we could do a charity benefit auction. But we just had to go on. It was interesting. Dick Simon told me, he actually admitted to me he hit the brake instead of the clutch coming out of 4 to do an upshift. So that kind of stops the car, especially when you're banging your left foot on the brake trying to come to the green.
Oh Lord!
But he had a nice giggle out of that one. It's like, oh my gosh.
So one of the other interesting aspects about the Fast Masters Championship, Terry, was with the IRP Road Course, and as you mentioned earlier, folks weren't doing 185 into any. I mean, they were barely doing 100. Also, with the very compact nature of the track, you have a bunch of lions, some older than others, but some feeling that adrenaline for the first time in a while, and you're going to have to force passes in many cases, knowing you don't have these long straights, big braking zones. There was a lot of carnage, but I wouldn't necessarily put it down to old age or ineptitude. It was
going for it.
Look, half these guys are from NASCAR, so they know how fenders work as well. I mean, there was the competitiveness, I think, drove a lot of the accidents that we saw compared to, it's just a bunch of old guys bumping into one another.
Yeah, the one thing that did come out of round one that we changed instantly is no more oval. The original, again, I was trying to think of the fairest thing we could do because we had some oval racers, road courses, like could we were going to run a heat on the oval, a heat on the 90 degree, the left, right, left. Yep. And clearly we're saying, let's just keep it on the road course, so at least they have to woe it down and go through. So that was one thing that spun off that. I would say, again, we thought initially when we did this that guys like Bob Aiken, in which he made it into the final, would still be pretty, might have an unfair advantage. Derrick Bell, he had just raced at Road America like 3 weeks previous,
Yeah.
and he didn't make it in the final. He didn't like the walls. He
Wow.
was really uncomfortable. And Derrick's a good friend, and he just flat out said the same thing. But the cream kind of rise to the top at the end, although, I mean, you look at all these guys. I felt bad. Gary, we did have a rule. If you put a dent in it
Gary
in practice, Bettenhausen, you couldn't race. So Gary never even got a chance to race, and that was, we had to scare the crap out of him to say, don't crash the car in practice, for Christ's sake. But Gary
I thought
did.
you might have just threatened Gary you'd take the cigarette lighter out of the
Yeah,
car, and that
exactly.
would get him to fall in line.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool.
So tell me, Terry, about the momentum that starts to build, right? You get through the first round, you make the aforementioned tweaks and such. Tell me about starting to roll, because I know for what you do, producing IndyCar series events, you get that rhythm. You start to get whatever production sensibility that makes things flow easy, I would hope, or as easy as they can. With the relative compactness of this opening championship, were you able to get into that?
Oh, yeah.
Or did you feel that as a promoter you're just getting pulled in too many directions to focus on the product?
No, you know what was really, really cool, Marshall, was that we had, obviously a partner hotel. The guys would come in a day before, we'd greet them, and it would be social. It was really neat to see everybody, come together. So we had good time. We had a real nice jacket for them that looked like a letter sweater from Notre Dame. And
oh, wow.
So it was really and again, we spent a lot of money trying to get it so that the guys would really, really appreciate having spent their time. And as I say, I mean, still trying to, we didn't do it as a handshake. We gave them all a $5,000 check just for showing up. Remember, Dick Greer sent me a picture of his still framed. He never cashed it, thank God. So that got us a little closer to out of the red. But, it was we laugh about it some, but I was super proud to pull this off, as was everybody else that helped me on it. It was just really, you hate to see your legends just fold up and go away.
Absolutely.
So it was pretty cool. Across the board.
Tell me about the behind the scenes. You mentioned drivers coming in the day before. I have to imagine one of the most satisfying or enjoyable aspects for you was just getting to be around some of these lions, just interacting, maybe some getting to know one another for the first time, since there are multiple disciplines. What was that like, just getting to bask?
I'll give you a great one. And I've always been a big David Pearson fan.
Oh, yes.
And I was sitting there. I couldn't wait, actually, because it's funny. I just kind of missed him in my career. He just had retired, so I didn't get a chance to really cover him. But I was making small talk with him, obviously blowing smoke up his skirt. But it was just, I said, how cool is it that Bobby Allison is coming back? He hadn't been in the car since Pocono. And he looked at me, he goes, I don't think it's so cool. I go, oh, boy, here we go. And he goes, that guy still owes me money for not gassing up my airplane. One time he borrowed it like 12 years ago. And I thought,
we might have tapped into some old rivalries by mistake here.
Yeah, and it was really fun. And honestly, again, I'll say it for Paul Newman again. He was so gracious and fired up. It almost seemed like a validation for him. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn.
No, but I think that's a great point.
He was like, hey, I'm in this club. And as I say, autographs, no problem. Speaking to the fans, no problem. I'll bet you he felt more at home doing this little thing than he did on any kind of sports car grid.
Wow.
It's just a hunch, obviously. We can't ask him now, but it was really cool.
So let's start to close, Terry, on getting down to this multi-round competition with the stated finish of, final round. We've whittled this down. Tell us about the finale, because that, for me, and what I recall of it, it was also fairly special.
Yeah. No, I was was trying to think about that more. Obviously, Bobby showed how good he was.
Oh, yeah.
But Parnelli was in, Bob Aiken was in, Brian Redman, David Hobbs. There was nobody that kind of skated into the final. Rutherford made it into the final. Parnelli, if I already said him. But, actually, people may not know this, but Parnelli broke a rib in a Hobbs was trying to go down underneath him out in 3 and 4 and push Parnelli up. And he hit a lot harder than when we first realized. But, man, they were really good. Obviously, all the other people in the final accused Bobby of trying to work Tony Dow and getting the good car, but
that's just a stated fact by now.
But gee whiz, it was for $100. We had $100,000 in cash afterwards, and Bobby was very happy to receive that. But yeah, as I say, I think some people might have questioned some of the people we invited, but ultimately, kind of what I thought about is that the guys that were really good, that had a lot of wins, still made it to the final. As I said, my biggest surprise might have been Derrick Bell, but he might have been thinking about others. He was still pretty active at the time. So,
So 25 years. June 19th was the inaugural. We're here at the end of July, so the 25-year anniversary of this, Terry.
Yeah.
What comes to mind, but also, I don't know if legacy is the word, but whether it is the Nissan and the GT Academy, that we've seen a lot of racing reality-ish type shows, competition-based shows that are, have television production minded aspects to it. Whether those folks know it or not, they are essentially working from a playbook that was established at IRP back in 1993.
Gosh, I've never really ever thought about it that way. I just think, honestly, Marshall, the circumstances were so unique to be able to pull this off. I didn't have to really grow. I think we extended the air window by like a half hour is all to accomplish this, because again, if people remember, we're running either with sprints or midgets as well, so there was such a how much further than a USAC midget can you get from than a supercar? It was just so ironic, but in a way, maybe people talk about it a lot. I'd love to get Thunder back on the air for one last hurrah, because it was such a nice format. It didn't matter that we were going to 18 different tracks. It just doesn't matter. People want to see people race. And obviously that worked out for the Stewarts and the Gordons of the world. And then, Vogler was still my all-time favorite. But it was so unique. I don't think anybody thought we were going to go do this year after year. It was just, but
I don't know how many people thought it was going to go past round one.
Yeah. Well said. It very well, it almost didn't. That's what I was saying. It was pretty hairy after.
Tom Walkinshaw needed some sedatives.
Oh my God!
I would have to imagine.
You got to think about it too. Trickle literally he flew in he was racing at Michigan and flew down, jumped right in the car, and he was like, I'll win this and get back for the for the Cup race later that weekend. But not when you drive through a bunch of 4x4s on the front stretch.
Well, that's actually the perfect ending question, and I don't know if you can answer it, but when all was said and done, did you ever get a grand total out of Tony Dow on the repair bills for all the Jags?
No, not really.
I don't know if there are that many zeros.
Probably not.
Yeah.
It was, they did have, I will just say, that they originally were hoping to sell those cars for about 1.2 with a V12. And then they weren't getting orders, so that's when they jumped down to the 6. Still plenty powerful, still sexy as can be, heavy. But, oh my gosh, it has to be. I think ultimately, even when we were racing them, they wanted like $750 for the car. They were trying to sell them at that price. I don't think it ever took off. Maybe we heard them, but oh gosh, it has to be multi-millions. But it was worth it.
Terry Lingner, thank you for creating such a fun and memorable racing series, and we're also incredibly thankful that you're still here making wonderful products for us to watch each week with IndyCar, and got IMSA coming up, and all kinds of great stuff on NBC and NBCSN. Thank you for your time, brother.
Never feels like work. It's always fun.
Amen to that.
One of the great things about being better at everything than everyone else, as Uncle Bobby Unser is about to tell us, is if folks would just listen and do as they were told, things would turn out better. Here we go with the irrepressible, omnipotent, just the greatest of all time of all things, Uncle Bobby Unser.
Well, when Terry first called me, Lingner, then I was very edgy about them trying to fix things, you know, like Johnny Caples with USAC. And that type of thing, I just don't go for, because to me, I was as important as anybody else there. I was very, very leery of it, because I've seen the type of fixing that NASCAR does. I see the type of fixing that Johnny Caples was doing at the time, and I already knew he wouldn't want me to win. So all I wanted was a straight deal. So I asked Terry, I says, who's going to test and develop the cars? Because you got to develop them for a racetrack. You know, you got different springs, different sway bars.
Sure.
You know, the engine's going to be a little different. Common sense that we all know about. And so I told him. Then I asked him. I said, "Who's going to do your testing, your development?" And he said that Rutherford was going to do it. I said, "Okay, I'll see you later. I'm out." and it isn't that I'm against Rutherford. That's for damn sure. He's a good friend. But you can't take somebody that's going to compete in it and give it to me. Man, let me fix them. You know, I mean, I know how to do that stuff. That's what I do. And I'm okay on a road course, you know. And so I didn't like that, so I told Terry goodbye on it. And then later on, he I don't remember how he got a hold of me, probably back at Indy. I was there. And he told me that Rutherford wasn't going to do it. I forget who did it. One of the guys that wasn't entered. But at any rate, he did good. In other words, he took to heart what I told him. I says, you can't, if you're going to have a guy in the race do it, then let's pick Bobby Unser. I'm holding my hand up first. Okay? Then I'll have a reason to really whop these guys good, you know?
Yeah.
So that doesn't happen, and he calls me back, and he says he's got this other guy that's not going to be in the series. And then I says, okay, I'm glad to do it. Everything has to be equal. You have too much money involved for it not to be right, fair, and equal. And I told Rutherford this in the drivers' meeting. You know, I'm starting up front, so, you know, they're real quick to try to, in a group, start pointing a finger at Bobby Unser because, you know, I know how to get a race started. I know when to get on the gas very often. I'm pretty good at that stuff. And so I got to worry about Rutherford. They're going to be up there, and he's going to be like, because USAC's doing it, you know, he's going to be like a big deal, calling the shots and this and that and the other. Well, shit, I ain't that dumb, you know?
Mm.
I've been down this gosh darn road before. And so I told Rutherford what the rules were going to be for the drivers. That means for me in the race. You know, if you don't like the way I start the race, we'll run them till they run out of gas. Or till the sun comes up the next morning. I don't give a damn.
Yeah.
I can last as long as anybody, you know. In those days, I was still in good shape and everything. And so I really, really told Rutherford off. But I know, or not Rutherford, but Caples. And I know what Johnny's going to try to do. You know, he's going to think all of a sudden that he's a big shot. You know, he sit up there and dial it like NASCAR does often, you know. Time for a NASCAR yellow. Boom. Well, they did the same thing. I just got meaner and worse, and did my tricks worse and harder. And you'd think that Caples would learn. God damn, he came from Albuquerque. We've raced against each other many times, and I'm not going for it. So I told Langdon that. I don't know, Terry probably was in the driver meeting.
Yeah.
But I just didn't, I don't like fixed things. I mean, NASCAR was always good to me. But I don't like the concept of the NASCAR yellows. I'm leading the gosh darn IROC race out there with a broken leg one time. Leading the goddamn race, gonna win it, and the son of a bitch, take one of them tires. The cars don't even run down there, but the tires are in the ground, and they took a piece of it, somebody threw it on the track, now we got a yellow flag. And I had a full back straightaway on them, and my knee was losing the Novocaine, you know? Oh, shit, I'm telling you what, I hurt so bad, I thank God I had a big lead for a while, because I'd have to reach down there under my leg, pick my foot off the throttle, and get it on the brake. And my right leg that was broken had to do both jobs, the throttle and the brake. And it just was a bitch, And they just took, who was it? It wasn't Roger Penske. He was there as one of the owners, but he wouldn't. Roger wouldn't think of that. That's not his way, And so somebody decided that Bobby ought to lose that whole damn back straightaway lead. Man, that was good. So they take it away from me, and then I figure out, I let my knee relax a little bit, but the time is going against me, because the Novocaine wears off in time, not by jobs, And so that's what I figured they might do at that Jaguar thing, see? So I just plan. So when the green does come out, man, I whopped them so goddamn bad the next time. It was as bad. I got every bit back that they took away from me. And, of course, went on and won the race. But I didn't care if they, like in that IROC race, Father, I didn't care if they started that thing 50 times. If it's going to be a television thing, I'm going to make sure they see what's going on. That was my deal, And they didn't like it. But that's Caples. That's not Roger Penske. That's not Les Richter. It's not any of that group. It's Caples. He knows what he wants. He wants a race for television, and he wants it to be real close. Well, pardon my French, but close my ass. $100,000 for winning it. Now, if they want to see close, watch.
Now, Bobby, I have heard a rumor. I don't know if it's substantiated or not, but I've heard a rumor that you like money.
Yeah, I know. When it got that high, boy, did they get my attention. I had a couple of little spares they didn't know about.
Oh, Lord. So,
man, I'm telling you what, all jokes aside, that's a fucking lot of money.
I know.
And then I got it for the heat race, too. I think that was another 15 or whatever, And shit, they talk about getting me ready for a race. Shit, I didn't make that much personally in my first Indy win.
Wow.
So, man, I'm telling you what, I looked at that and I felt sorry for George Fulmer. First place, George is really a good race driver. But the guy really needed the money. In other words, he, honest to goodness, needed the money for his life cycle, business cycle, whatever you want to call it. And I kind of felt sorry for George, because he ended up getting in the wrecks in the back. Because that's some of the stuff Caples wanted to cause me to be involved into all that shit that was going on behind me. Well, that's not a very good thing for me to be involved in, you know? I mean, the money is up front. And so I just tried to make sure that I helped cause those wrecks. You know, I'd take off on these fast starts, and then I had to put on the brakes and get on the gas again. I mean, I confused them guys so bad. And, you know, like Terry Rice was saying up in the booth, don't those guys know Bobby Unser used to run sprint cars all the time? Man, I do know how to start a race on my benefit, not theirs, you know.
So, Bobby, let me ask a couple of things here that there are two things that are going to be crazy in perpetuity. One, turbocharged V6 mid-engine Jaguar supercars, right? Pretty amazing, but if we're talking about, and the Fastmaster Series is going to be hosted at Road America, Mid-Ohio, Brainerd, pick some sort of big road course where a sports car like that was designed to compete. So you take this big, super expensive supercar and then throw it on the IRP, call it, quote, road course, which isn't really much of a road course. It just seemed like the craziest damn thing. Super tight, no room. I mean, you're just rubbing shoulders the whole time on track. How did you approach this? It just seemed to be just a bizarre concoction.
Yeah, and it was, and I thought so. And I'm sure I told Terry that. You know, what in the world? You're going to make a road course out of Raceway Park? And they all told me yes, and blah, blah, blah. And they needed me too, see? And they needed names to be in that thing, of a certain age, of course. And so, in a way, they concocted that because everything was local. And they wanted it because now we're getting down to the cost of everything going. First place they'd had to pay to go to Road America, no matter where they came from, they'd have to pay everybody's transportation. All of that type of thing would have kicked in. Hotels, transportation, and airfare, you know. It would have all kicked in. So it made sense to them to have $100,000.
It was a big wedge of money, period.
Yeah. And so if they'd have gone to Road America or someplace, you know, for a road course, they'd have had all the money. Well, not all of it, but a lot of it, you can imagine, just goes to expenses, which they'd have to pay. I wouldn't go if they didn't do that, you know. In other words, if I had to pay my way there, I wouldn't go. And so what they did was man, at Raceway Park, it's a local deal. It's a good deal. They made a pretty nice road course. And you know what? Whoever, I think it was Scott Pruett, okay, as my merry little brain gets to go a little bit, that developed the cars. And obviously he's good, see. And so what they figured out is, and it did work this way, the cars really handled well. They couldn't do much racing side by side. That's where the problem happened. But man, I'm telling you what, that Fulmer and I had a knockdown drag out, you know, because first place, George is really good, and he really understands that type of deal, and the cars ended up handling really well on that track. I mean, I'd go on that turn 3 on the track that's there, you know, the 5/8 mile or whatever the heck it is, and man, I'd go in there wide open and crack it a little bit and make it through that turn, and it didn't make any difference which car I was in. Everybody was real careful to make sure I don't get the same car, you know? Yeah, because they all think I'm going to go a little bit fast. So they're just worried about it, and I don't blame them, you know? It's $100,000. You got to keep thinking that. And so the cars ended up, whoever developed them did a good job. I liked them. They had really good brakes. Had an engine, the turbocharger lit really quick. In other words, very little delay in it. And I know back in the back, it was rough. Guys like Parnelli, poor guy, I mean, he got wiped out pretty quick because you put a drag racer. Now think about this. You put a drag racer in with a real racer that does road circuits or ovals or whatever. He doesn't know how to drive. It was unfair to them and unfair to the whole program, in my opinion.
Looking at the roster of drivers, there's some where, you know, you're thick as thieves. You mentioned Parnelli, for example. Obviously, you know, lifelong friends, etc. There are others who you've raced with, maybe, you know, coming out of sports cars who you might have known a little bit. But there were a number of drivers, legendary drivers, who you would have known and such, knew you could trust or at least have fun with. And then there were some others where, and this is not saying anything negative against them, but to your point, you know, drag racer Ed McCulloch was in there. And, you know, there's some kind of a little bit out of left field where a little bit of a mishmash of drivers to go up against in these heats.
Well, it was a terrible mismatch. And the guys that do drag racing, it'd be stupid. What if drag racing was going to have a big deal somewhere? Denver, Pomona, someplace. And they call me up and say, come on down, drive this drag car. And I've never even seen one go, except in pictures.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be fair, you know? I mean, they got to get drag guys to run them. So this is the only place, and I obviously told Terry that. You know, I wanted him to have the best of the drivers that were over 50, because if the program's good, it may continue. And for $100,000 to win, I get kind of interested in that. See, I think it's nice, and so they should have had no drag racers involved in anything. I mean, the poor guys. It's not fair. It's not fair to them, and it wasn't fair to us. And obviously, some of those guys, I can't reminisce back about the race that much now, except Fomer and I, you know.
Yeah.
But all those guys that were having wrecks in the back. I mean, you know, if they'd have been all oval track or road course drivers, they'd have known what Bobby Unser's going to do and how he's going to start the race. They'd be ready for it. Instead, it instigated, probably helped instigate, at least a lot of wrecks, you know?
Absolutely. I guess the last question for you on looking back at Fastmasters 25 years later, I know for me, watching it with my dad, it was really cool to see some of the legends and heroes like yourself, who we hadn't seen in a car for a little while, come back out, have some fun, get the blood up, get the adrenaline going. Any sense of appreciation like that for you, for what this series briefly represented?
Just think a little bit. Parnelli Jones retired, but in the meantime took Bobby Unser to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
He won it once. I ended up winning it 3 times. He's the guy that took me back. He's if I have a hero, there's my hero. And yet I'm going to have to run a contest against him. and he's going to try extra hard. He doesn't care if I'm Bobby Unser, Timbuktu, you know. He just doesn't. He wants to win, too. I mean, you know, another thing that really showed up back there was almost every driver took their whole family back there. Now, think about that. Their whole family had their wife, their kids, all supporting them, including Parnelli, and a lot of those guys did. And with me, took a girlfriend, and that's it.
But that's a great point, though, because for a lot of and I hadn't really thought about that, a lot of the racers who were involved in Fastmasters might have retired and started a family afterwards, so their wife and or kids might have never actually seen them race.
But I think you're right on that. That's what they did. But it ended up being what I saw when we did the heat races, dull and boring, you know. fun to run the cars, but nobody's there. Not a big deal. And then all of a sudden, when we have the big race, there's girls all around the place, and they're all married to these drivers, you know. And it was fun to see it. But, you know, a lot of these families didn't go see these same guys when they're running some of their races, you know.
Yeah.
But it got really exciting there last with the Fastmasters, because here the families all come out. Parnelli had both of his kids, you know, and his wife, and then maybe some more. But the same with the others, you know. Fulmer apparently not married, so he didn't have anybody there. And the only guy that I really had to worry about up front was Fulmer. And then the next one probably, I figured, was going to be Parnelli. But, you know, think about the guys like me that I've totally, David Pearson. How good was David? Is he still good today? That type of question comes into my head really strong, because he's a good friend of mine. I really like the guy, and I really think he's a good race driver, you know. So I figured him being really fast, and I don't have to list all the guys in front of me in the wrong place, but I had them, you know, all figured out. So the excitement was building inside of me a bunch, thinking how you going to do things. I could tell by the practice times that Fulmer was going to be fast, for example. And Parnelli wasn't quite as fast as I thought he would be. You know, I figured out everybody in the field like that. The drag guys, you hope they crash in the heat races and get them out, you know. Well, I mean, that's terrible to say. But
no, look, if you didn't say it, I'd be surprised, because I know you were thinking it.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, they're nice people. But, boy, they didn't have any business there, you know. When that green flag drops, the shit's going to hit the fan by all the guys that I think about, like a Pearson and a Parnelli and those guys. Rutherford, I know he isn't. Johnny isn't a road circuit driver, you know. And he didn't do very good. But he tried hard. I mean, he really, really put his heart and soul into it. But I tell you, it ended up being, those cars ended up being a lot better for that track than people would have thought. And I mean, we used those cars really hard.
Yeah, you know? Well, I was going to say, that's one of the things Terry and I spoke about. Ooh, man, talk about repair bills. And these aren't little, you know, Ford little crap boxes, you know, little sedans or whatever. Was there any sense of guilt, Bobby? And I know the answer to this already, but was there any sense of guilt of some of the damage that was done to these very, very expensive cars?
Ironically, there wasn't, Father. I hate to say that, because if it was my car, oh, I'd be crying, you know. But, you know, like, we're out there doing our pace laps. Fulmer's alongside of me. I just ran my car over one time and scraped took his mirror off. I mean, really messed up the right side of the car, or right side of his. I just run my car right down the side of his, took off his rear mirror and everything. And what was that for? That was to show him I'm serious. Hey, I'm here. You know, this is going to be a terrible battle. This is what this is about. And I talked to George later, who's obviously a good friend, and he's thinking the same thing, except I did it and he didn't, you know. I mean, and it wasn't that I didn't hurt the car that much, because they're all carbon fiber, and so, but the mirror, I don't know how much that mirror cost, but I'll guarantee it cost a bunch, you know. But that's the way I did all the guys there, you know. It was just going to be a hell of a battle, so get ready, you know. That's a lot of money.
I mean, the minute you introduce, I don't want to say greed, but if the purse was $5,000, of course it would be nice, but that wouldn't be a real carrot being dangled. You know, if you look at most of the names involved, everyone's earned a fairly good living in the sport. $5,000 wouldn't have moved people to do anything extreme. But you start dangling a bigger carrot, and there were some moves that were uncharacteristic, maybe even unbefitting for some of the reputations of some drivers there. But, that's a nice little addition to a retirement package.
Yes, yeah. And, if they did something like that, like every year, or even 2 or 3 times a year, they'd get my attention right away. I mean, you can get yourself sharpened up a bunch just by, and when I see guys like Pearson and Parnelli and Rutherford and Fomer and guys like that, shit, I mean, my hair on the back of my neck starts standing up straight. That's what I do. I've done that all my life. I love stuff like that, Poor Fomer, he got knocked out, and I happen to know how bad George needed the money, and I felt sorry for him, but I don't really feel sorry for him.
You felt so bad that you were intent on wiping the right side of his car off and taking the money. I mean, that's what friends do for one another.
Yeah, well, that's what I did, and George says, well, what would you have done later on? We were talking. He says, what would you have done if I had just pushed you a little bit going into the first turn? Because I had a choice. Started on the outside, if I remember. And I told George, I says, if you'd have pushed me off there, George, come on. I'd have just gone right straight to the grass, collected you at the other side of that turn, and you'd have never finished that race. That'd have been the end of you. And we just laughed about it, But he was totally fair. He gave me a car width to go on, just barely, and somehow or another on the back straightaways right there, I came out ahead, and it was okay. Or maybe going into 3. I was really quick into that turn 3 of the sprint car track, But I had more fun doing that thing as just get that goddamn politics out of it,
And as we close our Fast Masters at 25, we have our man Tony Dow, someone with an absolute iron trap for a memory, and a man who was never one to shy away from offering opinions, often of the negative variety, and often of the type that has me laughing. Nonetheless, Tony Dow is a riot. I've spoken with one of the legends of the sport, who obviously was the featured player during the inaugural season, but I haven't spoken with the poor bastard who was in charge of making cars happen, repairing wadded up cars. I don't know where to start, mate, other than it just feels like you're at an accident site the whole time.
Let me give you some background to it. And when I said the backstory is really interesting, Jaguar were pulling out of racing in North America.
Yep.
And there was still 1 year of a contract to go. And Tom had gone to New York to meet with Mike Dale and Bob Burden and so on. And he came on to me. He said, well, they'll go another year. However, what they want is they want to be in a series with more relevancy to the product. And they also, it needs to have international appeal with drivers, and it needs to be on TV, live TV. What can you do?
Oh, wow.
So I called Rod Campbell, and I said, you got any ideas? And he said, the only thing I can think of is Terry Lingner's been trying to put a deal together with the guy that up in Charlotte that does the little midget races, but nobody wants to climb in them. And I said, well, what about, a really expensive Jag? And he said, well, give it a go. So I called Terry and drove. I met him in where Purdue University is. He drove north and I drove south, and we met up somewhere there. And he said, well, look, I've already got an agreement with this guy to build these cars and so on like that. And I basically put on my best English voice, said, look, mate, if you've got XJ220s, $250,000 supercar with all these drivers in, and Jaguar, helping out, and we put up a big prize fund, that's got to be better than what you're looking at with this, like little midget car thing. And we went round and round. Anyway, we finished up having an agreement, and it met all the criteria for Jaguar. So they had to stay in the deal. So then Tom shipped across 12 XJ220s, which weren't going to sell.
Yeah.
and first of all, they were illegal to import into the country. You couldn't use them on the road for sure. They had to come in as race cars.
Yeah.
And they had the V6 turbo, which was prone to getting air pockets in the water system and blowing itself up and so on like that. We had no budget to change springs or roll bars. They had a viscous diff-in, which round of banking when they lifted off, would uncouple, which is why they quite often backed into the wall. And we had to use the standard Bridgestone tyres that came on, which actually weren't that bad, although we had to pump the pressures up a bit. And we had to put we'd never put roll cages in the bloody things, but we, decent seat belts and so on. And it really was a dog's dinner, to say the least. After the first week, I had every guy on the team hand their notice in.
Really?
I had to, I really, really had to pinch my... Well, the guy who was the number one guy on the cars was a guy called Pete Hodgkinson, who is now new car build manager at Mercedes F1. And he'd come to us from Roush, really super mechanic. But and here's me explaining that I'd gone to the wall to keep everybody employed, and so on. So he had to help me out with, by sticking with it and so on. What was really funny was we had a body shop about 2 miles away, and after the first week where we were trucking these cars across to the body shop to get beaten out and repainted and so on, the guys got fed up with that, and they were driving 220s through Valparaiso and across to the body shop. Nobody gave a rat's ass, honestly. It was so funny. And nobody ever said anything. I mean, we could have had elephants in them for all the police care. We were part of the town structure. Some of the guys should never have been, drivers should never have been allowed in the cars. But it was what it was to make it happen. I still got a model of an XJ220 that's in a container on its way across to me at the moment from Atlanta, signed by every driver that was in the final.
Oh, wow. I'm hoping all the panels are beaten in as well, so it's, period correct and authentic.
No, it was just before the final. There was one car, a green one, that seemed to win every week, and so the word went round amongst the drivers that was what was wanted, that you had to be in that car, which wasn't true. So I took it out of the rotation and had it as a spare. And what we tried to do for the practice on the Saturday afternoon was use the 2 spare cars for practice, so we at least had a full field when it came to the racing at night.
Some self-preservation there.
Before the series started, Lingner was like, can we get Paul Newman in it? And so I'd worked for him and knew him from Newman Haas and so on. And I worked for him in Can-Am with Rosberg. So I called him up, and he was like, well, I've looked at it and I was quite keen, but, I don't want to look silly. And the rules were you weren't allowed to drive one before the racing. And I said, look, come down to IRP and drive it and see what you think, and then make a decision, which was totally against the whole thing. But to get Newman in a car was what we did. And
sure.
I've got loads of pictures of that happening, which is really cool. I would usually arrive down about 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. The guys had got down there first thing in the morning, got set up, and then I would arrive. Anyway, I arrived down the week that Uncle Bobby was there. I arrived down, and he was already about to go off and do his testing. He was in the car, strapped in. And I walked over and I leaned in the window and shook hands. I said, how you doing? And there was a sort of grunt and so on like that. And I said to him, look, will you do me a big favour? And he looked at me, he said, what's that? I said, will you drive this the way they're meant to be fucking driven and show these tossers how to do it? I tell you, the seat belts filled out. It was just awesome. The seat belts just expanded out of sight where he sort of stood up in the car. And he was just brilliant in it, When we got to the final was actually boring because we had all the good drivers in it by then, and nobody... And there was a big move to get side-by-side starts. And at the start, you had Parnelli on the front with Bobby, and Bobby just went round the outside of Parnelli. And then, of course, Lingner wanted to spice it up for TV, so he threw a caution for no reason whatsoever. And so we had to have another restart with about 3 laps to go. And it didn't make any difference, but I was always very annoyed at the TV element to try to rev it up. Really, really good guys in cars, Parnelli, and his smoothness in the car was just mind-blowing how good he was. You could see that there was a couple of dragsters, Ed McCulloch and somebody else, that thought they were racers and they really shouldn't have been there. And the whole NASCAR thing, we had Benny Parsons in it, and he was a super guy, but as soon as the last NASCAR guy was bumped out, we had Bobby Allison, just mega, people, and they were just super nice to work with. But as soon as the last NASCAR guy was dropped out because he didn't make the final, their interest went away completely, So, which was sad. And as I say, after the final, we went back to the hotel. We loaded the mess up and went back to the hotel. And we were in the bar, and Uncle Bobby came down, which I'm told he was told to, but I don't think so. And he bought drinks all round for everybody. He just won $100,000, so he could afford it. But he was a bit special.
Tony, what was it like having to service and maintain these supercars that, as you mentioned, the budget was very restrictive on your end, but you mentioned the body workshop 2 miles away. I would say, I'm guessing, but I would assume that between rounds the cars spent more time getting straightened and having bodywork replaced or prepped or otherwise than almost anything else.
It was. Don't forget, all the panels were aluminium. There was no composites anywhere. It was just aluminium panels, and there were some large areas of aluminium panels. And we had no spares. I mean, 0 spares. So, the guys, we were beating it out. I mean, the ones that finished up were 50% Bondo in them, I would think, They were aluminium bondo, aluminium composite. It was gutsing. And the other thing that would happen is every now and then, I mean, don't forget the cars had been certified for road use, and so in terms of reliability, it weren't bad, but it was the panel beating that was the tough bit.
And how about the morale? I mean, you already mentioned that all your racing team, one that had been, talk about change of worlds, to go from running one of the all-time greatest prototypes, the Jaguar XJR14 in 1992, to being effectively support staff and crew for an old-timers TV racing series in 93. I'm guessing not only did you have all the mechanics rock up at the end of the first week and say, we're out of here, but I'm guessing that was an ongoing fight or effort on your part to keep morale decent?
It became black humor. When you're in deep shit, how black humor comes in?
Yeah.
There was a lot of good but very dark humor about certain things, the fact was we kept people employed, and the obvious thing was hanging out for a year in the hope that we'd have something the following year, So, people with mortgages or commitments to girlfriends, wives, and so on like that sucked it up. I mean, that's what you do. It wasn't. They were pros. They're really good pros, and IMSA was falling over at the time, so it wasn't exactly a great loss not to be doing that. We just had to find another program.
What comes to mind, Tony, thinking about reaching 25th anniversary of Fastmasters? It was such a crazy thing. It was a crazy concept. It was a relatively small blip on the radar here in the U.S., but for those of us who either watched it or I'm guessing took part in it like yourself, hard to forget.
But you have no idea what I had to put up with. Tom came over, and I got him to drive the XJ12 pace car because I couldn't handle him being in the pits. I mean, having to put up with him storming around with his XJ220s getting dinged all over the place. And we had a deal. They had this wooden deal that the drivers walked through at the start, and 2 laps into the first race, somebody came steaming down what was the pit lane and completely wiped out this wooden monster that had been parked in the pit lane thinking it was out the way, and some TV guy leapt over the wall and the door was missing, and he stuck the microphone in and said, well, what was it like?
Wow.
The whole thing was beyond belief, It's just, it was amazing. It was amazing. What do you say? I don't think, Jaguar didn't want, they got conned into it. It met all their criteria, but they didn't like the fact we'd managed to pull it off. It was never going to happen with them for a second year, To
close, Tony, what happened to the cars, right? I mean, you've imported the cars, you've raced them, you've had to kind of keep them alive. What happens to them after the final race? Where do they go?
They went back to England, and a guy called Andy Morrison took them all into a little unit he had with TWR and stripped them and fixed them up with new panels and everything, and he put a rear wing on it and painted them like neon pink and neon greens and so on, and had chips put in the motor so they were like 700 horsepower, and sold them to collectors.
Any thoughts whether he revealed their wall banging history at Indianapolis Raceway Park?
No. But, I mean, if you'd looked at it, I mean, he did a really good job. You would never have known what happened to the, you know, you'd never have known what they did in their early life because they were properly serviced and maintained and sorted, you know. But they were an asset on the books that you had to, you know, sort out.
Crazy times, my friend. I wish we had more silliness like this to fill the margins between highly structured motor racing events, but at least we have some things like this that we can giggle at and shake our heads at and wonder how the hell it ever came to fruition. And that was our look back at the Fastmaster Series, a glorious blip on the motor racing radar from 1993. Thank you again to Terry Lingner, who sat down with us at Mid-Ohio in August, then Uncle Bobby, and also Tony Dow, who we spoke to recently to complete this. We'll also say that if you have an interest in any of the 400-plus podcasts we have recorded so far, you can get them on iTunes, also on Podbean, the host for all that we do here on the Marshall Pruett Podcast, also on Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever good podcasts are sold for free. You can get what we're doing here, so hopefully you've enjoyed this little special feature. We actually have a couple of additional special features ready to hit later in this fine month of December. All right, I'm Marshall Pruett. This is a Marshall Pruett Podcast presented by Cooper Tires. Thank you so much for listening.